Hello all my chess friends! In this video I have one of Magnus Carlsen's most incredible and ruthless performances, a game in which he completely obliterates a strong grandmaster named Dolmatov right out of the opening, completely dismantling his Dutch defense and getting an absolutely crushing position by move 11. Not an easy feat for anyone in a classical time control with an opponent rated almost 2600, but there's more. Magnus Carlsen was only 13 years old when this game was played. So if you haven't seen this game before, it is a must-watch for any fan of Magnus Carlsen's, as it contains some compelling evidence to support the theory that A, Magnus Carlsen is the greatest player who ever lived, or B, he's been practicing some sort of sorcery, allowing him to lead such strong opponents into such dire situations so early in the game. But enough said, let's just get right into this game and see exactly what happened. Magnus Carlsen with the white pieces begins with knight to f3. Dolmatov plays the relatively unusual Dutch system with f5, to which Carlsen makes a relatively unusual response. He doesn't play d4, c4, g3, those are the typical moves. He has something up his sleeve. He plays d3. This may be some very deep preparation on his part. The computer doesn't really like his move initially, but after a few moves it begins to change its mind and says, yeah, this is a good idea, because after d6, sensible move by Dolmatov, preparing to get a nice big center with e5. Carlsen's idea is to play e4. Strike at this pawn here. Okay, so Dolmatov plays a good move. He plays e5. You don't want to take on e4. Superficially, it might look kind of good. You're trading your less central pawn for white's more central pawn, but after the recapture d takes e4, this opens the diagonal for the light squared bishop. It's not a good idea. If you play e5 now, there's going to be bishop c4, and f7 is just a big fat target. If you try to develop normally with knight f6, there's going to be knight g5. You don't have a great way to prevent a piece coming to f7. If you instead try bishop e7, trying to stop knight g5, well, now there's queen d5. Now the queen's looking to come in. Not a great way to deal with that. So Dolmatov plays a good move. He just plays e5 here. Carlsen develops knight c3. We get knight c6 from black. Now Carlsen takes on f5 because he's planning to play d4 next. Of course, you don't want to play d4 without taking on f5. If you try that, there's going to be f takes e4 with an attack on this knight. After knight takes e4, now d5 comes with an attack on the knight. So once the knight moves, e4, closing things up in the center, planting this pawn on e4 with an attack on the knight. Black is the favored side here. So Carlsen plays e takes f5 first. And Dolmatov plays an inaccurate move here. I think most players would play what he played though, bishop takes f5. Very natural looking move. But actually the correct move here was knight g to e7. Because after d4, this is Carlsen's plan, here we could have a trade down on d4. The queen ends up taking on d4, and now knight takes f5 instead of the bishop, comes with an attack on the queen, and the queen will not be able to maintain her powerful post on d4. That's a great square for the queen. So contrast that to what happened in the game. After bishop takes f5, same thing, d4 by Carlsen. And you pretty much have to take this pawn, or else if you make some other move, then Carlsen can play bishop to b5 and start undermining the defense of e5. So knight takes d4, it's a sensible move. Carlsen captures, and then we end up with the queen on d4, but this time there's no knight coming to f5 to kick the queen away. So Dolmatov here declines taking the pawn on c2. That is just falling way too far behind in development. If you were to do that, then bishop c4 by Carlsen, and white's just getting way too much activity. The computer here says you should go queen to f6 and try to challenge the queen, but then queen d2 hits this bishop, and once the bishop moves, we got castles, and then knight d5 is threatened. It's just, black's too far behind in development. He's uncastled. This is bad. So you don't want to be going and hunting down pawns at this stage with your king in the middle. Knight f6 is what Dolmatov played. It was a sensible move. Now here Carlsen plays what might not be the most accurate move, bishop to c4. It may be a little bit better to play bishop f4 first. The logic behind this is we want to discourage c6. This is a useful move for black. So if c6 is played here, white can castle, and now there's a problem. d6 is under attack. No good way to defend that. If you try d5, queen e5 check, picks up the bishop. So bishop to f4, discouraging c6 may have been the best plan, but Carlsen plays bishop to c4, and so Dolmatov does get in c6. This is a useful move because there's ideas of queen b6 challenging the queen. You can play b5, kick the bishop, and expand on the queen side. You can maybe at some point get away with d5, but after Carlsen's move, bishop to g5, he finds the right move here. Dolmatov plays b5. Now I should point out that d5 is not working here because white again can just castle, and you don't have time. If you try to take this bishop here again, there's queen to e5 check, picking up this bishop, also with an attack on the queen. And if you try bishop e7 to try to block that file, we're just going to put a rook here. Again, you can't get away with taking here because bishop takes f6. This bishop's pinned, so you got to take with the pawn, but then the queen grabs here, hitting the bishop, hitting the rook. You can see everything's just falling apart. Okay, so d5's not working there. And I should also point out that queen b6 is not working here because in this case, there would be bishop takes f6. That's why Carlsen played his bishop to g5 here instead of bishop to f4. So he could meet queen to b6 with this bishop taking on f6. Of course, if you take the queen, bishop captures and you're just down a piece. And if you take the bishop out, then of course queen takes f6 with an attack on the rook, with an attack on the bishop. So that's why queen b6 is not working. b5 played by Dolmatov. Now we got bishop b3. And here on move 11, Dolmatov blunders. He makes a very natural looking move that I think a lot of us would play. Bishop to e7. Looks reasonable. Blocking the open file to the king, you're developing a piece. But this fails. Now let me show you what he should have played. The best line here apparently was h6, putting the question to this bishop. Best move for white is bishop h4, maintaining the pin on this knight, but now there's queen to e7 check. And now the best move for white is apparently to play king to f1. You know, you could put the queen in the way and allow the trade of queens, but now you got nothing but a bad pawn right here. You can play knight to e2, but now there's g5, so that there's no bishop takes f6. Bishop moves, and now you got this c5 idea. And once the queen moves, c4, the bishop's trapped. But even here, white has a fighting chance. If he castles long, gives up the bishop. The engine says that maybe black's about a pawn up. Because the king is pretty weak and the queen's on the same file with the king, white's hitting the b pawn. But that would not be a good road to go down. So back here, the best choice would just be king to f1. If you were to try to do the same thing with g5, look who's losing their queen. Or a piece. You know, you're losing some material. So h6, that was the best move, but Dolmatov messes up with bishop to e7. And Carlsen castles long. And you wouldn't necessarily think that black is completely lost here. But let's take a look and see what happened. The problem is black would love to castle, but this annoying bishop is on this open diagonal. Magnus Carlsen has successfully exploited the weakness created by that early move f5. In the game, queen to d7 was played. Okay, let's look at the obvious d5. What's wrong with that? Shutting down the bishop? Well, here there's rook h to e1. If black were to try to castle here, there would be queen to e5. Hitting the bishop, black will lose a piece. So you have to do something about that. Let's say you move that bishop first. Now there's bishop takes f6, g takes f6, queen takes f6. Look who's pinned, look who's under attack. This is not going to end well. Oh, by the way, c6 is under attack too. d5's not really working out. Queen d7 is what's played. Carlsen brings his rook to e1. The bishop is now pinned, threatening to capture on f6 a couple times. Dolmatov gets out of the pin with king to d8. You might think castling is better, but it's not, because a4 begins to break things open and this king is not safe. So king d8 might have been a little more sensible, but now Carlsen finds a very nice move. What would you play here as white? He sacrifices the exchange. Rook takes e7. It's a beautiful move. After queen takes e7, queen to f4. Hitting this bishop. Okay, the bishop backs up, but now we got knight to e4. Threatening to take on f6, also hitting d6. So Dolmatov tries d5. If you try rook f8, adding some defense to f6, knight d6 is pretty bad. Opening up the file to the king. Knight to f5 is being threatened. You can see black is in a world of hurt here. So d5 is what's tried. And now we got knight takes f6. Obviously you can't take like this or else bishop takes f6 and the black queen is lost. But Dolmatov decides he's going to try this plan with h6. Carlsen just backs up with the bishop. Still can't take the knight, but there is g5. Okay, there's a fork. Maybe it'll be okay. But after queen d4, Dolmatov has to resign because there's just too many threats. You got the discovered attack. Whenever this knight moves, this rook's going to be under attack. So, you know, let's say you take out the bishop, knight takes d5, queen's hit, rook's hit. You could move the queen back to defend the rook, but now we got knight b6, hitting this rook, threatening checkmate. You know, it's over. What else could you try? Rook f8, getting off of that dangerous diagonal. Now there's just simply knight takes d7, queen takes d7, and the bishop will get out of danger. If you count the value of the pieces, Carlsen is up 1 pawn in material, having the 2 bishops for a rook. But with black's king stuck in the middle, no good way to connect these rooks and get him into the game. It's just completely hopeless. How is this rook ever going to get into the game? You want to try to get some activity over here? No, just play a4. You can't ever put the rook here. Bishop's got that square covered. If you try to play, maybe you want to play rook c8 and then push. Well, anytime you push this pawn is going to be lost. There's too many pieces hitting that pawn. So black is basically playing without this rook. Now you could try running over here with the king. Try to get to b7. You go rook king c8. But here we have queen c5. All right, we're hitting the rook. King b7. The rooks are connected. But here there's rook takes d5. C takes d5. Bishop takes d5 check. And this is actually a mate in 10, according to the computer. King a6. Bishop c6, hitting this pawn, hitting the queen. You can see where this is going. So an incredible performance by Carlsen, age 13, taking down a grandmaster in 19 moves, who was rated over 100 points higher than him. Move 19 is where he resigned, although he was actually lost on move 11 when he played bishop to e7, a move which many lesser players would not have been able to exploit the way Carlsen did, with this beautiful rook sacrifice. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel for more analysis like this coming soon.